Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the Scarborough Town Council workshop. This evening's topic is beach fees. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, and it is 6 p.m. I will go ahead and allow everyone to introduce themselves by way of taking attendance. The records show that all of the councilors are here except for Councilor Doherty at the moment. So my name is April Seither, and I am the chair of the Town Council. Councilor Cushing, go that way.
That is me, Councilor Cushing. Karen Shoup, Town Council.
Tom Holt, Town Manager.
Corey Fellows, Town Council.
Bill Donovan, I live at Higgins Beach.
John Anderson, Town Council. Thanks for being here.
Steve Kramer, Recreational Waterfront Manager for Scarborough Community Services.
Nicole Hall, Operations and Events Manager, Scarborough Community Services.
Nick Klisch, the new Community Services Director.
Roger Shabbat from Higgins Beach and on the committee.
Howdy, I'm Emily Loader. I'm the Vice Chair of the Community Services Advisory Board.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. At this point, I am going to go ahead and turn the workshop over to our guest this evening. Emily is going to get us kicked off, and then we'll hear from staff.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Roger and I are the representatives for the Community Services Advisory Board this evening. So we're excited to answer any questions for you and really dig into the research that we provided for all of you beforehand. And we're looking to make sure that the 4 key points that we did in our research are addressed tonight to make sure that everybody understands what we did. As a committee, we are all residents of Scarborough, live in different parts, and utilize the beaches in lots of different ways. And so we wanted to make sure that all aspects of committee members were heard, as well as taking into consideration the surrounding towns and what their fees are compared to ours, and utilize them so that all residents moving forward could utilize the beaches as most as possible. So the first point that we're going to address that is in the packets that you guys have is the changes of cost for residents versus non-residents. So we looked at the different towns in resident, non-resident fees and seniors and year-round versus seasonal and what the differences are. And that should be in the first page of your packet. And across the board, Scarborough is the lowest than anybody else, which, you know, may be a good thing for us now, but we also want to keep in mind with those fees that we use those towards other costs that the beaches might have. And we do appreciate wanting to make costs for residents lower, but also keeping in mind that we do have to pay to maintain those beaches, which we'll dive into a little bit later. So that's that first chart that you see. It's evaluating all of the different towns and their price point levels. We took in mind the consideration of the out of resident passes and what that number is. Yeah, that right there. Thank you. And so, yeah, so we evaluated the hourly rate, daily rate, and all of those different things that you can see and how they receive information. So we did an assessment. The whole committee compiled that information. Taking into consideration those different beaches, we know that we are the lowest, and even with raising our rates, we are still the lowest of any of the other beaches as well, to keep in mind. But we want to make sure that we don't put it at a price point that nobody's going to come. It's still okay for residents. You know, that's an acceptable rate, but also that we can still pay for future costs in the future. The next page in your packet talks about beach capacity and demand. And we looked at the days that we were open and available and changes to weather, and knowing that all of the beaches are weather dependent. If it's really sunny, we're going to have a really great year of income. If it's not, then we're not going to have as great a year. And keeping in mind that when we have great weather, we're going to have people utilizing the beaches a lot more, which means we're potentially going to have a lot more residents as well as out of town people. And so we want to make sure that we're prioritizing those residents. So we wanted to still offer resident passes, or excuse me, non-resident passes, but decrease that number a little bit to make sure that we're prioritizing our residents who can get into the beaches. I know that I think Counselor Donovan had made a point to limit the amount of passes even further than what we had stated. We agree with that number, and we wanted to not the beach passes were 437, which were sold last year. So we still wanted to maintain that out of resident passes and decrease them a little bit. So that's where we got that number from. But we also agree in decreasing them more to make sure that we're prioritizing residents. Currently, the pricing of the timing and the amount of money that's received is kind of all over the place, and it makes it really difficult for the staff to manage the amount of money and bills that come in and staff at all of the different hours. And so by evaluating the different staffing needs that we have, and something just as simple as only having $20 bills on hand and making it easier for people to count and manage. We looked at all of those little details. So by keeping $20 in mind across the board makes it easier on all of those different levels for the staffing, for people to pull out of hand, which helps with the consistency that we're offering in it with the timing. We want the money to match the timing. So having one time across the board, having one fee across the board to make sure that it's consistent. Nick is going to dive into the logistics behind the staffing and the costs associated with the revenue in the future capital project. So I'm going to pass it over to him.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the committee and the board for all the work you did over the course of the last year, much prior to my arrival here in Scarborough. I certainly wasn't present for those that research the committee did, but what I can definitively say is they took a measured approach when they compiled their research and their findings. With no increase in resident fees, capping non-resident beach fees for the first time, increasing those passes for non-residents from $150 to $180, and moving to the flat fee for daily parking, which I'll discuss in a few moments, regarding ease and consistency across the board. Those proposed changes embodied the research and the work they did. So I do want to point out and say thank you to the board for that. Since then, a lot of questions have been introduced around the proposal. There's certainly room for feedback and changes, and I think that's why we're all here tonight. But we need to recognize with those changes or amendments, there will have to be increases elsewhere or the ability to maneuver around that because our operating costs have to be covered or have been historically been covered, in full. In terms of the beach fees function, the primary objective for those beach fees is to make sure that we have well-maintained beaches, serviced and remain high quality for all of our residents and non-residents that are visiting us. Those costs in those areas have increased quite a bit over the last few years. Obviously, costs are rising elsewhere as well, but those include beach rakings, bathroom cleaning, service to systems, plumbing, things that come up, water, sewer, electric, everything is increasing. So adding additional resources in terms of the Park Ranger pilot program, which was highly successful in its first year of institution, and helping us with enforcement and support around the beaches and lightening the load on the police. And also our part-time beach staff fees are included in that. As for parking fees in general, the variable parking rates by time have been an issue. Steve might be able to speak to this a little later in terms of questions. But for us, it was confusing to the public. It was confusing to our staff. So we were looking at trying to make changes to be more efficient across the board. We also had negative feedback previously of $30 flat fee on the weekend was too high. So we were trying to come with a hybrid fee of the $20 piece to be lower than the 30 that we got that feedback from, but also to be able to cover for some things that have happened over the course of the years. For example, we internally think the majority of the morning and late afternoon users that may be affected greatly by this, our users are primarily non-resident. and absorbing that $5 fee, they're coming either early in the morning, paying that $5 and staying all day and taking up a spot within that lot for the entire day. We've also had examples over the course of time where members of local campgrounds have come down and bought excess $5 passes, gone back to the campground and sold these passes for a higher rate. So all of these things were considered in the parking fees of trying to have a flat fee, along with the supporting the staff of the incremental amounts, the $20, the flat fee, and the easier piece on change. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about the Beach Reserve Fund. The function of this reserve fund is to provide financial resources to improve the beaches or help us maintain these over time, or cover costs in a rainy season from an operating standpoint. Currently, I know there's been some questions around what we have in that fund, what these projects are. Currently, we have $137,000 in that Beach Reserve Fund. That balance is after the funds from the FY 25 have been appropriated. And all those projects are either complete or will be complete by the start of this beach season and are covered. And that is our remaining balance in that reserve fund from a year ago for $137,000. I have not had a lot of time to dive into the CIP or master plan here in my first few weeks. It's something that I want to do over the course of time coming up. But I know one of the bigger projects that is on that list is the $700,000, which I'm sure has increased even from that original quote or proposal for a total Herd Park infrastructure project over there. So that net money that goes back to the reserve fund at the end of the year, it helps to service these projects for us or future projects. Obviously, if our net is around $70,000, we are not going to be able to make an investment of $700,000. We're going to have to look for additional resources in funding to come up with that amount of money. So I just wanted to touch on a few things that had been brought up in conversations or emails or concern that we had gotten some feedback about, and then we will answer any questions you may have the rest of the night.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nick. So I will take full responsibility for kicking the beehive a little bit on this and wanting to explore the possibility or at least have a discussion about subsidizing more of our resident passes. And so that was kind of the origin of wanting to have a broader discussion that I didn't really feel like it was appropriate during the business meeting. And I felt like it was more appropriate to have that kind of level of conversation during a workshop. And then I also knew that if I opened up and wanted to discuss something that maybe was a little more in depth, that I knew other counselors would also have other things that they wanted to explore and talk about. We know that the beaches are, such a valuable resource to our community. I think that all of us take a lot of pride in having that resource and making that resource available to our residents. And so I know that there's a lot of stakeholder groups and a lot of people to take into consideration as we have this discussion. And I just want to take a second to appreciate that, this is really being done with the best of intent and trying to take everybody's position on this into account. I also want to thank all the residents that emailed us their perspective in the last few days or so. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to council questions. I can kick it off or somebody else can kick it off. You would like me to? Sure. Okay, I'm gonna set the runway for Councilor Cushing. So if we could bring up the chart that shows how many passes we subsidize, and I'll just jump right into kind of what I had hoped that we would be talking about as a group.
Should be the beach revenue and expenditure.
Yeah.
It shows the senior resident passes.
Yep. And so what some people may not know, if you're not 60 or over, is that we do have a program in town that subsidizes our beach passes for anyone 60 or over. That includes any car that is registered to their address. They can have multiple passes, just like if you were going to go and buy an additional $5 pass. We grant them as many free passes as they have vehicle registrations that match their address. And so even with our numbers, we're subsidizing 3,600 passes for people that are 60 and older, which I think that the intent of that is amazing. But I struggle a little bit with the fact that it's not based on income. It's not based on anything other than age. And to me, I feel like we could maybe do more to make sure that people who are struggling with income are able to get a beach pass. And I don't know the best way or the most fair way to make that accessible to anybody that would like to have a free beach pass, but I see a challenge here with the number of passes that we're subsidizing. And the vast majority of the passes that we sell at that $40 resident level. Just kind of, it feels a little arbitrary to me in some ways. Yeah,
So what do you mean by that? That you think it should be, they should pay more or less?
no, I would like to see the residents pay less. I would like to see, if we're gonna subsidize, if it is within our financial means as a town to subsidize the 60 and over beach passes, then I look at those remaining 1,986 passes and say, I would like to see if there's an opportunity to subsidize
Okay, so
those too.
you're saying leave the, because I'm saying 60 and over should have them first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
60 and over should have them for free, and let's have a conversation
Over
about
60,
subsidizing those
I
other
really
ones.
don't go to the beach that much. And, I mean, and it's a younger kids thing, a lot of the time. And so I don't think it affects the town much at all. And if they do happen to want to go, let them go.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. So what you're saying is that, annual pass is $40 and you're thinking it should be even less.
Yeah. I would like to at least consider what that looks like.
Right.
And I understand that, the revenue from those beach passes helps to pay for our project and funds our CIPs, and it helps to pay for our beach maintenance. And those are all things that, financial decisions that we need to take into account. One of the things I'm kind of struggling with, that we've been getting a lot of emails, saying that they are not in favor. First of all, I'm surprised by the number of people who do not think that we should subsidize passes. So I'll just put that right out there. That it will increase or create too much demand at the beach. And to me, I just feel like if there's that many people that want to go to the beach that aren't getting a beach pass because it's a financial barrier, then we have a problem. Like, if there's that many people that want to go, then they would go to town hall and get a beach pass, and we would have that same crush or volume of people going to the beach anyway. And so to me, that I'm having a little bit of a hard time figuring out why the argument that if the beach passes were free, more people would go to the beach. Dichotomy. Yeah, Karen.
Sure. So I think some of the concerns, and I'm sure that Nick in the committee can also speak to this, but I think, one of the concerns that I think brought up, first of all, was we also might have residents showing up to the beach thinking that they can just get in free. So then we have staff sitting at the kiosk. And I was actually going to ask Steve at some point to speak to actually the feedback the staff is getting, because one of the recommendations was directly because of staff retention and staff issues and the way they were treated.
Yeah.
But I think the concern is that we would have suddenly residents just showing up, backing up traffic, going, I'm here, I'm a resident, let me in. No, you have to go to town hall, you have to get your pass, you have to do that. And then also, good or bad, suddenly people who otherwise would not be going to the beach are now going to be going to the beach otherwise. And I don't think it's an income thing. I think it's just kind of not on their radar. I mean, I am liaison to the Community Services Rec Advisory Board. I've been in all the meetings. They rely on the beach reserve fund solely. So I think when we consider eliminating the small fee of $40 to residents who, they're not just parking, they're using the facilities. We just went through all of the things that come along with it. I think we then would be in a situation where we would not be able to rely solely on the beach reserve fund, and we would be going into the taxpayers' money. And so their budget might be going up because that income has decreased. And I think it's just it's a system that's worked really well for that committee, for that department and for the beaches. And I don't think it's wrong to ask residents to pay a little bit towards the nice facilities that they're getting. I'm not against some sort of income-based idea. I think that's a great idea. Not good or bad. I wonder if we should be limiting passes that we're giving to people. If you maybe say your second pass is $5. I'm very concerned about, and I know that they're very concerned about their budget and that loss, because now they're going to be dipping into our taxpayer money. And I think they're trying to avoid that.
Councilor Cushing.
Oh, well, I have a lot of questions. First, I haven't seen any data that says that we have an economic problem, that we have people who have hardships and can't go to the beach. I've personally observed we have a parking problem, we have a capacity problem. But it's hard for me to see that we have any evidence that suggests that our fees are keeping people from the beach. I don't think we know how many slots we have. We know how many tickets we sold on a particular day. But we don't really have any data that shows what the hourly demand is. And if you're managing a parking lot, that seems to me to be something that you'd want to know, so that you could plan for capacity, you could plan for staffing and all of those things. When I look at the numbers, the as-is situation looks to me like we're showing about a $70,000 profit as of 2024. And by my crude math, it looks to me like this increase, no matter how you cut it, is going to get up and add about $115,000. I'm sorry? I'm saying that the $20 fee increase,
The $20 fee.
the $20
for
fee increase
Non-resident parking or for pay to park?
for
The
pay
new
to park,
rate.
the new
Right.
parking rate is going to add about $115,000 to the 70 that's already there. That's pretty good.
I just wanted to clarify.
The rates, am I wrong about that?
That was the one number I couldn't figure out how that was extrapolated because,
I just,
yeah,
I-
how based on like, because
Well,
what is the
first-
structure, right, is like
so you gave
five,
me data till
Yeah.
August 20th, which was incomplete.
correct.
So I just took that number and I said, this is if we multiply the current fee by the number of passes sold at each of the rates and total that up. And then we just simply say $20 times the number of passes sold and do the subtraction math, you come up with $115,000. But again, excuse me, it's not my job to figure that out. It's your job to tell me, what is it? Well, I'm answering the question.
I guess
Excuse
the problem in that math is that where somebody would be $5 in the AM or $5 in the PM, are they necessarily gonna come and do
Well-
that $20 rate? Like, because across the board, people were coming at the
Oh,
different times.
that's a second issue.
Yeah.
Okay, this is an all things being equal comparison, but you're absolutely right that, and you've admitted this, that you are disproportionately putting the burden on the AM and the PM users who are non-residents. And I think what you said to me as well, they can go pay $180 for the pass. And I suppose some of them who are regular users can do that. But my expectation would be that if I could use the beach for $5 to walk my dog or be a surfer or whatever, and now all of a sudden it's 20, then I think you're probably right. That might diminish the usage. My feeling about that is not that we shouldn't be raising the fees. We do need to raise the fees to keep them on parity. We should probably go up on them a little bit every year. But that's a separate issue from how we do it. And in your explanation, you say that equity, fairness, consistency is important. Now, I'd agree with you that $20 is consistent, but it certainly doesn't strike me as if you have one group of beach users over the period that have been using this beach under the current circumstances, and you're going to up their fee by 300%. And then other people are going to get a different increase. That doesn't strike me as fair. So as you know, I proposed, why not just raise them all? And unless you can explain differently to me, so far what I've heard as a rationale for the $20 increase is that it's easier. And I would argue that it is. But I'm not necessarily sure it's fair. So again, I would come back to you and say, you're absolutely right that if you were going to do a financial analysis, then I believe the business term for it is price elasticity. If you raise the price, then you decrease the demand. And so any argument with respect to changing prices ought to take that into consideration. But the truth of the matter is that with respect to demand, we're all kind of guessing here. And all I'm saying to you is that it seems to me, just me, and I don't expect to win this argument, but I'm going to make it. It seems to me that just adding money, adding an increase to each of the current fees, doing it for a year and investing the additional revenues that you get into a real parking system like Passport, which I use today, was wonderful. Okay, it's automated. It doesn't require any, all it requires is enforcement. And the thing that I find troublesome is that in those early morning hours, we don't enforce it. So it's another case where we have a rule, but we don't have a mechanism to enforce it. So again, I am supportive of increasing these fees, but I'm also supportive of doing it in a way that is equitable to all of the users, because the people who live in Saco are not bad people. They come up here to this end of the beach because they want to. The surfers who use the beach do it. And those people who are using it in the evening and in the morning are more than likely working people who can't hang out at the beach with their kids during the day or on vacation. So with that, that's my feedback.
Could you, somebody, I'm not sure who the best person to speak to this is, speak to the challenges of the fee collection, like at the beach?
Yep,
Just what our current structure is, what the staff responsibilities are, and then kind of lay the stage for
okay,
us.
so I can speak to that. So we collect the $5 in the morning, typically from 7 to 9 is when our staff is collecting that. And then from 9 to 3 is the 15. And then 3 to 5 is the 5. So we only like to keep a certain amount of cash on hand. And we don't have a ton of change. So we have to drive around and change out bills, the 5s and the 10s, which makes it difficult because you're dedicating a person going from beach to beach with change on really busy days. And then they're carrying that cash as well. And we want to try and limit as much cash as we can floating out there with our staff. And as far as collecting, you always have to have 2 people with the cash. And it just backs up the line. But that's our biggest challenge, is having that much cash floating around and then having to change it.
Ideally, I think we would also like to collect those fees from as long as the ordinance allows. But in
Yeah.
terms of a staffing perspective, controlling the overtime, if somebody's working a 7 to 7 shift or 7 to 5, the long days, we haven't been able to staff up to even be able to collect from the 5:30 to the 7 a.m. time. So that's kind of been an honor system from what Steve has told me in the recent history. So that's another issue we have, just getting to the staffing levels to be able to provide the attendance for the parking lots for the duration that we could collect fees.
If I came with a credit card, could you accept it?
Yes.
Yes.
You do? have a
Yes,
credit card.
absolutely, yep.
And so what portion of people pay with a credit card? What portion of people pay in cash?
It depends. I would say 30% maybe. A lot of people are still in the routine of having cash with them when they come to the beach. So we do have 2 separate lines. One of my tenants will stay with the credit card machine, and so the person stays in their vehicle so we can move them along quicker. And then we will accept cash, before the credit card machine. So we try and move cars in and out as quick as possible.
Do you think that if you ask for a credit card, you get more of them? I take what you're saying, that people have 20 in their pocket, but they may also have a credit card in their pocket.
Possibly, yeah. And then another thing with the credit card system is sometimes on cloudy days, the internet connection goes down. So we have to manually we have to reboot the system and things like that. So sometimes the credit card machine doesn't work as planned. It has glitches in it. We have to restart it, which takes, 5 minutes to reboot up, which gets the line longer. But the credit card system is convenient to have.
Which,
One more question. And you said you considered the passport system. I asked the question.
so that would be the issue with the passport is similar to the machine is you need service to be able to make that happen. Like people need to have service on their phones to be able to access the app and do it. And the service at most of the beaches isn't really fantastic, which makes using that app harder.
It is spotty on certain days.
Yeah.
The
I'm
internet service.
confused. So we don't have wireless internet at the beach.
We
I-
do not.
We do
No,
not.
No.
I believe it all runs off LTE.
Do you think it would be worthwhile to have?
Yeah, it's cellular based, yes.
Right. Do you think it'd be right? And the cell service, I agree with you,
Yes.
is pretty spotty. The towers up here.
I believe if it was hardwired in, it would be a lot more reliable.
Mhm.
So
Right.
if it was hardwired into the machines, it would be a lot more reliable.
That would solve a lot of problems. Do you
That
think?
would- Yeah, especially at certain beaches, specifically Higgins has
Mhm.
tough cell service down there.
I think ideally, if we had the right or a system in place or a parking management system that was invested in, I think that would offset some of the concerns or questions here. But, you know, I'm not sure what lengths the town has gone to in terms of that passport piece. I know there were some initial discussions around the coastal water pieces, but I just don't know how far. I haven't had enough time to research. I'm not sure if somebody else
Yeah,
can speak.
Coastal Waters took the matter up, and I see Mike Slade in the back, that perhaps can speak to this later. And it's not progressed too far. I think their interest was more, on-street parking and in part the not phenomenon, but the practice of having, parking occur on private property and just, to come up with kind of a global system, if you will. The other one is the co-op, parking lot currently, has certain number of public spaces. Those are free. And so again, the suggestion was, and it's worth certainly considering further, coming up with one system that would fit all, if you will. We've made a couple of steps in that direction by, we'll be installing an automated gate in Herb Park. That would be, a prerequisite in terms of controlling access into and out of the space. So that's one investment, headed in that direction. Councilor Cushing mentioned probably the biggest challenge would be the enforcement piece. We do not have that system in place, and whether it's aligned with the police department or civilian parking enforcement. That's something that I think we need to spend some time to understand and cost out. And I think we'd all agree that we should not be doing this if we don't have a system in place to enforce it.
Yeah, Councilor Fellows.
Just first off, just quickly, living down sort of at the Blue Point, Pine Point end of town, I can definitely say anecdotally, at least in my experience, that the cell service down there, particularly during the summer, gets very sketchy. It's noticeable during the summer when there are more people around who are presumably, drawing on the data. So that is definitely a challenge. Picking up on the theme of demand elasticity, going back to Econ 101, I'm curious if any of you could, and maybe this is for you, Steve, sort of speak to any anecdotal evidence or feedback you have based on sort of the on the ground interactions with visitors, whether they're residents or non-residents, around what drives demand. I mean, obviously to an extent, it's sort of obvious. If it's a hot and sunny day during the summer, you're going to have more people, but there seems to be kind of a premise or an assumption behind some of these recommendations that beyond the very valid desire to maintain a budget, which I definitely get, that there's sort of a demand management aspect to this. And so I'm curious as to whether you or the staff have picked up any feedback from folks around, well, I'm coming here because it's cheaper here because Scarborough's fees are now lower than elsewhere, or if there are other things that we should maybe be aware of.
No, demand in the summer is pretty heavy. It's all weather dependent, pretty much. But it is heavy because a lot of the renters, the campgrounds, school buses come. So holidays, we had a really nice summer, so every day was really busy. Wednesday through Sunday are our busiest. Monday and Tuesday are our lighter days. But I didn't really pick up on any trends per se, but we also didn't ask that information. I think going into this summer, I've talked to Nick, we are gonna set some data points, that we're gonna collect data. It wasn't on our radar last summer, but it certainly is now. So, I could answer that question better after we get through a season, focusing on more data collection.
Yeah, so days of the week, certainly UV index, I mean,
Yeah.
all the, but weather is the ultimate determinant.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of Junes that have been complete washouts, almost 30 days of overcast, and the numbers certainly bear that out. I would say that the other thing that I think is unique about Scarborough is that we've got 3 unique beaches. They all have different features. They attract a different beach user. From anglers at Higgins Beach to, you know, and Higgins is its own unique experience apart from Pine Point, and it attracts a different beach user, I think, that, and Ferry, my sense anecdotally is that is kind of a town beach. That's where a lot of us residents gravitate to for a beautiful sunset and a meal and a, you know, leisurely walk. It's not necessarily a swimming beach. So I think that's one of the unique things is that we've got unique draws.
I think that's a really great point to remember and keep in mind that everything is completely weather dependent. If you look at the beach revenues and expenditures, we pulled in 302,000 from all 3 of the beaches in 2024 by daily parking. If we have a terrible summer and it's rain every day, that revenue is gone. And so all we have left are the beach, the passes that we would use, which would go into taking care of those capital projects.
That's a great point. I mean, the strategy that we've always employed is to encourage folks and keep your seasonal passes affordable and encourage folks to go that direction as opposed to paying the daily rate. One, it smooths out those seasonal effect. That revenue is realized the day we sell that pass. It also presumably minimizes the cash handling and just the ease. You know, you see a pass, you move the car through. It's just a far preferable approach, we think.
I just want to take 1 second, John, before I go to you, to recognize that there are members of the public who are raising their hand online. I will take public comment. If we have time at the end of the workshop, I can take some public comment. Otherwise, we do have a public hearing scheduled for this evening. I'm not ignoring you, I promise, but I am going to keep clicking these closed. And I will allow members of the public to speak when it's appropriate, but so thank you. And with that, I'll go to John.
Yeah. So Nick, I know you talked a little bit to the CIP and I'm just curious from a annual target perspective, what are we actually targeting in terms of total revenue that we hope to collect to account for our CIP items? It looks like we've been collecting around $400,000 per year in revenue. So I'm curious with where we're going. Were we thinking there's a specific target we have in mind, especially with the Herd Park and other projects coming, that we want to make sure we use these reserves to cover those costs? So is it 450K, 500K? Like because to me, knowing what we want from a planning perspective would dictate how we may need to set the fees at different ways if we have a goal to use this to cover the full cost of Herd Park.
Yeah.
Now, that's not maybe our assumption. Maybe our assumption is we want to raise half of Herd Park in the next 5 years, the rest through bonding. But from my perspective, just knowing we have some major capital projects coming that need to get prioritized, anything we can do to try and raise money through fees as a means as opposed to bonding, I think would be good where we can. Again, I don't know if that's feasible given trying to keep prices relatively low, but to me, I think that's something I want to understand better in terms of we have this big capital project, as you said, that's probably no longer $700,000 and going to be a lot more. And so what is our strategy to use these fees as a means to either fully fund or ensure that we're collecting it to a point where we're not waiting 20 years to make the improvement?
Yeah, I'll tackle that. Nick is just brand new to this, so.
Yeah, sorry.
It's Tom. Historically, our goal has always been to cover our operational expense first and foremost.
Yeah.
So the beach reserve, there are some down years where we, for a number of reasons, the revenues come in lower than expected or expenses are higher than expected. And we'll draw for the beach reserve to make sure that we're not relying on taxpayer support.
essentially whatever's left over after all of that balancing act is what is available for further investment capital. And it's not the best way to capital plan, but we've often waited on capital investments until we've had adequate resources. I think back during my tenure, we built the Higgins Beach bathhouse using beach fees. That depleted that pretty significantly. It was about a $400,000 investment. You'll see in the FY25 budget, we've got 3 smaller investments nibbling away at Herd Park, but not the big one yet. So our CIP investments have really been determined by the availability of funds. And we haven't used fees from a strategy point of view, trying to fund to a certain level. I might suggest that Herd Park is really a bit of an anomaly. I mean, I think, but for these big kind of one-time capital investments, historically, we've been able to manage the systems pretty well and make the small capital investments to keep those beach facilities functioning.
So would you say that currently the strategy is more on the smaller capital and that Herd Park hasn't really been contemplated as a?
We've never looked at the fee structure as a way to attain a certain funding stream for capital projects.
So I think that's more of a question for the council.
Fair.
If the council feels like, do these fees need to be commensurate with the fact that we want to raise to a certain dollar amount in terms of getting to be able to fund Herd Park? I think that's a good thing to do, but again, I'm curious what council thinks. And then just in terms of the conversation on subsidies and equity, I have some ideas that I'll just throw out for conversation if other people have thoughts on these, but to Councilor Seither's comment about the $40 fee for residents, maybe instead of looking to subsidize significantly across all residents, maybe we get rid of the $5 additional fee for extra passes. I mean, it's $5,000 it looks like, so that's not a significant dent, but it tells our residents we want to try and remove some barriers. I like Councilor Shoup's idea of, if we want to look at AGI and things in terms of offering discounts to passes for people, if that helps, not just for residents, but maybe non-residents too, so that we're removing some barriers for access in that way. And then perhaps looking at other segments of residents beyond the seniors that we may want to consider for free passes, like people who are veterans, active duty military, first responders who live here. Like, I think that's typically, you see that sometimes in other towns where they offer those types of discounts or even free passes. So I think that's something we could do that, again, just kind of moves us in that direction so we can see how things land. So again, these are just some ideas that I was thinking about because I want to get as many people to our beaches as we can and remove whatever barriers that might be in the way. And then to Councilor Cushing's point in terms of the $20 fee in the morning and the evening, and also the challenge, it sounds like, with staff being able to be there early. Why don't we just start our beach fees at like 8 a.m. and anybody who wants to use it before 8 a.m. gets to use it for free. So those who want to walk on the beach, maybe they have to walk a little bit earlier than they would like. But again, I think there's solutions that we can discuss that at least move the needle in some areas that I've heard that are concerned. So those are just some ideas as I've been hearing the conversation that I'm thinking could be, a compromise for the way that the different counselors feel.
Thank you, John. The only other talking point that I had was to kind of inquire and suggest that maybe that removing that $5 fee in the morning could be alleviated by just not charging, essentially. And we'll just start our hourly rate at a time when we can staff it, especially if we're having enforcement issues anyway. And so I would piggyback on that statement. Counselor.
Just to keep in mind, just from an administrative point of view, these passes go on sale May 1st. We've already had people wanting to buy them now before the fees go, but we start sale on May 1st. There is a line out the door for the entire month of May, well into June. And I only mention that if we start adding income requirements or other, just producing the proper documentation.
Fair.
Adds a level of complication, but also delay. Even, I think people are fairly well trained needing to produce their car registration, but a lot of people are still report at the desk after waiting in line and then have to run back to their car. And so I'm just simply for conversation as we think about further ways to to cater to certain parts of our population, that will just add to some complication at the sale time.
Sure, I can appreciate that. I'll go to Karen and then I'll come to you, Corey.
Sure, so I cannot support, starting collecting at 8 AM, and because I just think I was a part of the conversations about the people who are using the facilities before 8 AM. I mean, they're using the facilities, they are using the showers, they are using the doggy bags, they are using the toilets, they are using the trash. They just happen to be using them earlier. And so I think I think we're gonna be really missing out. I mean, that's even later time where now people will be coming at 7:55 and parking all day. And then we will 100%, I think, have resident access issues if we push that start time up to that point. And so I think my concern is that we're not gonna be capturing the usage and the money that we need to cover what those people are using on that. We've always had people there earlier. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. And so, I think we want to stay in line with the timeframes that we've had. And I just want to remind folks, I actually have not had a beach pass for 2 years. I access the beach. I park for free on East Grand Avenue at 8 AM and I walk the beach and I get back in my car and I go home. So there is public access that is free, that is available in the morning. So I understand that people are upset we're raising it, but if they don't want to pay it, there is places to park for free. And otherwise, if they want to park there, that means they're using the facilities that we're maintaining and they're enjoying it.
Can I ask a clarifying question before I go to you, Corey? If we had individuals park in the parking lot, say we were gonna set it at 7 AM or 8 AM, whatever. If we had cars in the lot at that time, do we have an attendant who would go around and essentially put like a ticket on their car saying you have to pay you're here after 8, you have to pay the $20 fee?
Yes, so what we do, my attendants show up at 6:45 typically. And we do have it's like an honor system reminder that we put on the windshield saying, hey, your fees go to maintaining this facility and keeping it nice for people to enjoy. And it's on an honor system. We have no authority to write tickets. But most people do respect that and they'll come and pay the kiosk or through one of our attendants that are there. So that has worked. We started doing that last summer, and that has helped. But like I said, it's an honor system, so you have to take people at their word that they will do that. I don't want to put my staff in the position to chase cars down and put themselves in that position, so.
Understood. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, once the day gets up and running, it's a busy place. So you're
Sure.
trying to understand and
Yeah.
recognize that car was here before. We need to catch them on the way out. It just isn't.
Corey.
Yeah, just very quickly, first I'm certainly still absorbing all of this. I'm glad we're not making any decisions tonight. But I generally find myself wanting to err on the side of simplicity, both for the sake of the staff, but also for the sake of the visitors and the users, so that they don't have to spend 10 minutes thinking about which box they fit into. Sort of like when you go down and you read the dog rules. You feel like you need a lawyer with you, but my other comment just on and I appreciate Councilor Shoup's comments about wanting to make sure that this wasn't her word, but we don't have like too many kind of freeloaders early in the morning who are using the facilities. But to me, whatever the cutoff time is, if there's a period before which a fee cannot be enforced, then I don't think I would just as soon have it be officially free during that time, because I don't like sort of the optics or the feeling of having something that is not being enforced, and then it sort of just kind of lends itself to people gaming the system. So if it's going to be free during, before 6:50 or whatever it is, make it free. Thanks.
Yeah, Emily.
We 100% agree with you in simplicity. I go to the beaches every year. I'm on the board and I'm like, how much is it of what time do because I don't know. So that was another reason that we were like, we just pick one day and time across the board and make it as simple as possible. That's also with all of the signage that goes against, and it's not just like in us advertising on the website or social media, like on the sign, it's one day, one time, one price, and then that's it. And to address Councilor Anderson's comment on capital projects and everything. This is also the rainy day fund for the beaches. So if, God forbid, there was like a natural disaster or something that we know has recently just happened to some of, some of the area, this is the fund that we would also tap into to fix anything that has been damaged in the area as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, there were two questions that Mr. Cushing asked is, one, do we have the meter running and how much money we get in that? The number for that is about $103,000 that came in last year through the credit card. The second one is number of people coming in and we're giving free $40 passes at 1986 number. You didn't look down below, but you have senior resident passes and we give those out free. And they ended up at 3,641. So we consider it to the locals. And the town has been like that for many years. That's always been part of what the beaches are going. But our thoughts was really to maintain the costs of what we, so people don't have to pay on taxes if something happens. But I would like to see the $20 fee go for 1 year and see where we are, what dangers or harm we've done to the population of people going and try that, like we did with the $30 weekend fee. That didn't work, and so we were asked to come back, and this is what our group, all 7 agreed. And at the beginning, we weren't like a jury. We weren't anywhere close to being all together, and we had spent a little bit of time trying to get consensus of what we were doing. Maybe we were wrong completely, but
I can relate to that. I can relate to that sentiment for sure. We have about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. I can come to you guys. The one thing there are 2 things we haven't talked about, just for the public and kind of to think about before second reading is we haven't really talked about the increase in the non-resident fee. And we also have not talked about capping that number. And so just in terms of where we are and how easily we can chew up an hour-long workshop, those 2 topics really haven't been part of this conversation as of yet. Counselor Cushing, and then I will come down to you.
The new changes to at least Herd Park, there are gates, is that correct? Right, so when the beach is not open, then the gate could be closed. I mean, it's officially closed after dark and so on and so forth, right? So wouldn't that solve the problem of that we don't open the gate till staff gets here?
Yeah, I mean, that could solve the problem. The exit gate will always come up. There'll be a loop under the ground.
Sure, of course.
If you park there and
But the beach is closed when there's no one there to collect the money.
yes, the one thing I worry about is vandalism of the gate for people that want to get in. It does happen down at Higgins a lot. People will rip the gate up and strip the pins to get in or out when the gate is down.
Yeah, the notion of the gate at Herd Park was not necessarily to restrict access in, it was really to manage access, except for in the evening hours, when the park is closed.
Okay, I just wanted to ask that question.
I think it's capable though, if we wanted to.
So my last question is this, just nod your head if you agree with me that the solutions we're putting here are probably midway on the techno scale against what's possible. Is that fair to say that a passport system, for example, parking lot management system would be sort of at the high end and the other end? Well, you don't have to, but that's what I think. Okay. And so what I think is that this problem will go on and on and on in various iterations until we begin to bring ourselves up to close to the technological possibilities. And so if we raise these fees with the intent of really solving the problem, that would make a lot of sense to me. because it looks to me, I don't know what these systems cost,
Mhm.
but it seems to me that we have a big expense in personnel. We have people problems that could easily be addressed with some of the technological solutions, and we're not there yet. I get that. But the question is, will we get there? And how will we use the fees that you're increasing to really get into solving the problem? And when you do that, then a lot of this goes away, because then you can charge an hourly rate. You can, allow people to come and use the beach. And frankly, they don't feel like they've got to get in there early in the morning and park all day. You say, I'm going to be here for 2 hours, I'm going to pay for 2 hours, and I'm going to leave. That's kind of the way it's working in Portland, which has a huge parking problem, but they've addressed it and made it substantially easier to park down there using that kind of technology. So that is my plea to you, is to say, okay, we can do this. I don't think it's perfect, okay? But I'd love to hear a commitment to say we're really going to fix the problem by using modern tech. Thank you.
Bill.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you for I thought the recommendations that you made were very thoughtful. I thought they addressed what I perceived as some of the more significant problems. It was insightful to get the report on feedback on what bothers your program, what are the elements that make it difficult to do your job. So I thought this was very constructive in terms of what you've brought to us. Free passes is a tough question. And I'm very sympathetic to supporting Scarborough residents to give them a break, particularly if they couldn't afford it. Those are the people who I would put right at the front of the line. If we had a system that could do that, do it in a second. But free passes is, I don't know, $80,000-$90,000 in lost revenue. And that's a tax shift, as we lawyers call it. That is shifting that tax liability onto the shoulders of all the taxpayers in the town, most of whom never go to the beach, because we got 25,000 people. And we might have a few thousand people go to the beach. So I don't think that's a good idea, simply because it's not fair. So that would be my sense of your proposal. I like it. And I'd be prepared to support it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, Counselor Doherty, I'm going to give you the last words here as we wrap up our workshop.
They mentioned roughly $70,000 profit. They want to do 700,000 at Herd Park, but that's 10 years of the 70,000. And a 700,000 investment will probably last 30 or 40 years. So what I'm saying is basically you've already made that money, but like Tom said, he said, we do that. You set it aside and it's invested back into it. It was at Higgins Beach. And I think that's a great idea. I think it's working pretty good. The $5 is a good thing. I think in the morning, people get down just to walk a dog. And I think at Ferry Beach, I just know about Ferry Beach mostly. And the bathrooms aren't opened up until the crew gets there. They have porta potties, right? Am I right? In the summer,
Yes.
they're not open all night, right? Yeah.
They were originally, and we were getting a lot of vandalism,
Right.
unfortunately.
So people in the morning aren't using the facility, they're just down there for a morning walk. And I don't think that they should be charged $20. But I understand that if somebody then goes down, and like you said, the trailer, the camping grounds or whatever, if they get there early and pay $5 and stay there until 9 o'clock at night, that's a pretty good deal. And then the other issue about you said leaving and then being able to sell it and having somebody else come in later. So if you buy a pass in the morning for $5, you can leave the beach and come back?
Yeah, so it's a daily pass, regardless of what time you buy your pass at. We do check the numbers on it, but not necessarily, if it's really busy, we won't check the license plate number on the ticket. We do our best to,
Right.
once we realized what was happening. And this didn't happen a lot, but we saw it happen once and then we shifted
Yeah.
how we check the tickets.
Right.
But before we saw it happen, who knows how many times it did happen. Once we did realize it happened, my staff policed it as best to their ability.
Yeah, I would think it'd be not that often that would happen. but-
Yeah.
So I don't think it would be a big issue to have that. It does get confusing, like you said, as far as different fees and stuff. but
Yes.
I just think the $20 is a good idea because I do like to round it up and it's easy for making change and it makes sense.
Yes.
But to be down there for an hour or two in the morning to walk and pay $20, I mean, I don't know if I'd go for that. The other thing is like striper fishing, the night one. The night one is a new issue. There's a lot of population in town, more population, and what I've seen in the summer when it's really hot, a lot of people, especially inland, and I don't blame them, and I think it's good that they come down, but Ferry Beach at night is more busy than during the day. And they've been really good about it. They ride around and ride around until the space opens up. But I guess they're afraid of getting a ticket if they do park, because they will. They'll get a ticket if they park on the street. But later at night, and you're talking about gating it, and for me, being a law student, I don't want Ferry Beach gated. I don't even want to have to push a push code, but I don't really want that if we can avoid it. Because like striper fishing, they go down there at night and the evening, go fishing. I remember as a kid, you couldn't park down there after 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, because they ticket you. But my dad would put "gone fishing" on the window and then we'd go striper fishing and fish. And it was all right because we had the sign on the window, the good old days. But anyway, so I think it is. I think you're on the right track. $20, I think, is a bit much, but the way the cost of everything is nowadays and stuff, and as long as if we can hold that 20 because it's convenient for many years, maybe the $20 will work for the next 10 years, we hope, without having to increase. That would make it more in line with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. With that, I am going to go ahead and conclude our workshop. I want to thank the staff and the Community Services Advisory Board members for being here to inform this conversation. For members of the public, if you're wishing to make public comment on this topic, we are having a public hearing during our regularly scheduled business meeting, which happens in about 5 minutes. And so you are encouraged to make your public comment then. And then procedurally, we will take this issue up for second reading at our March 5th meeting. Thank you all again for being here and have a nice night. We will go ahead and adjourn, have a 5-minute recess, and then I'll go ahead and start the business meeting. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. I am going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the regularly scheduled Scarborough Town Council meeting for Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. Could you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tody, can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Doherty,
Here.
Counselor Cushing,
Here.
Counselor Shute,
Here.
Counselor Anderson,
Here.
Counselor Donovan.
Here.
Counselor Fellows
Here.
and Counselor Chair Cyber.
Here.
Thank you all present.
Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is general public comment. If there is anyone in the public or online wishing to make general public comment on something that is not on our agenda this evening, now would be the time to raise your hand or come to the podium, and I will take general public comment. We have one online. And you should be granted to speak, Penny.
Hi, good evening. I'm Penny Whitney, historian of 6 Friendship Lane. And I attended the last council meeting where several comments on the beach fees were discussed by the council, and I wanted to make comment on those ideas. A couple of the councilors spoke about providing free beach passes to all Scarborough residents, and there was some discussion about several social media posts regarding the residents paying enough in taxes so that they should be free. First, the Community Services Advisory Board approached the need for additional revenue with the residents in mind and proposed no increase to passes for the residents. As you know, the beaches are funded from user fees. The revenue collected is what pays for the infrastructure, maintenance, and staffing of our beaches, and that seems extremely appropriate. Residents really need to be educated that the beaches are not funded by tax dollars. Additionally, by providing free beach passes to all Scarborough residents, you're not limiting free passes to just those residents paying taxes, but you are giving free passes to people that are renting in town as well. And I acknowledge that those people contribute to our local economy, but they're not paying taxes to the town, and they will not be contributing to the beach. There's no connection between tax dollars and our beaches, and I believe it should remain that way. If the council feels that the $40 fee is too much for residents to pay, given the structure that the board used, trying to make certain we were not overpricing compared to other towns, maybe we should note that from 2021 to 2024, the number of resident passes purchased increased a little over 13%, but the number of senior passes issued we increased by over 26%. The number of senior passes that we give out for free, if it had to be paid for, is almost $145,000. Perhaps we should charge everyone, except our resident veterans, for passes. And please note that I am a senior resident, and I would be more than happy to pay $20 for a parking pass. I believe that paying for a pass is an investment in our beach, and it comes with a feeling of ownership and taking pride in keeping our beaches clean and safe. There were 2 other ideas tossed out that I made note of. Councilor Cushing suggested that Ferry Beach should be a resident beach only. I think that's a fantastic idea. Ferry is our family and senior beach, and it's the only beach without the option of on-street parking. Making this a resident beach would allow for far more residents to take advantage of the quiet, calmer beach environment that Ferry provides. Councilor Donovan suggested reducing the number of non-resident passes, and I also think that is a great idea. In closing, I would like to thank you for scheduling the workshop and for allowing this public comment so that we could be heard, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Asdorian. Anyone else wishing to make general public comment? As a reminder, there is a public hearing on the beach fees specifically on our agenda. And so I would ask that anyone else wishing to make beach fee commentary do that during the public hearing. But otherwise, I can take additional general public comment. Seeing no more, I will go ahead and close general public comment. Item 5 are the minutes from our February 5th, 2025 meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Show that is unanimous. Thank you. Item 6 is adjustments to the agenda. I would like to propose that we move item 10, standing and special committee reports and liaison reports, to directly after item 8, the town manager's report. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Again, just doing this to provide visibility to our community for our liaison and committee updates. Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor? Show that is unanimous. Thank you. Item 7 is treasurer's warrants, which I took care of before the meeting. Item 8 is our town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few quick items to report on. Eastern Trail Close the Gap project. As I've said in the past, we have permitting in place. We have provided plan specifications to Maine Department of Transportation, awaiting their final approval. That's about a 10-day process, they say. And then we'll seek federal highway review in a similar fashion. We are prepared to solicit bids thereafter and expect we'll be in a position of awarding bids by the end of March at this point. So very excited with the progress there. We're clearly in the final stretches. I want to report to the council and to the public. At the last council meeting, the council passed Resolution 2503, and that authorized a letter of support and also made a kind of a rough commitment, if you will, for local match for a project to improve Route 1. This is across the marsh. I just want to report that we've been put on notice that the grant program, the so-called Protect grant, has been paused. And so there's some uncertainty as to whether or not they're going to even accept applications at this point. So I'll continue to advise you as we get further information. With respect to the school building project, and perhaps Councilors Donovan and Sider can speak on this as well. Just want to say that the community survey is open and available. The date escapes me. It's about a 2-week process. Do you recall, April?
I think that paper copies are due February 28th. So if you take a paper copy, but then the deadline for the online version is another week or so after that.
Forgive me for not having those dates.
No
but
problem. I can pull that up.
hopefully the communications committee has done a good job of kind of plastering that out there and it's available, and encourage folks to take that. It takes about 20 minutes. I would also note my impression of the survey, having taken it, it really is intended to be as much an educational piece. The committee is still very much in their formative stage. They are quickly approaching the point of making some tough decisions, but they wanted to solicit and engage the community at this juncture. So a fair amount of the survey is educating what the options are. And there is a second survey that's planned. I think that's going to be far more granular and specific on 1 or 2 at the most, perhaps. And ideally at that position, at that time, we'd have a site that we could also test with the public as well. In terms of site selection, I do serve on that subcommittee. At this point, we've narrowed it down from 22 sites to 9 sites. We had a report out to the full committee at their last meeting that involved a review of 3 different sites on this campus. Again, we're in part waiting for the full committee to provide further guidance in terms of which solution is preferred, whether it's a smaller school or a larger school will obviously have a great bearing on what site is required. Again, the next 2 or 3 weeks of the committee, they did take this week off. It feels good for those of us that have been here every Wednesday night for 3 or 4 hours. But I do expect starting next week, they're going to get really down to the hard business of eliminating options.
And I can just confirm the paper copies are due February 28th. Paper copies are available here at Town Hall and at the library. And then the online survey closes March 3rd.
Couple other items. Marshview Terrace, the council had a workshop with the South Portland affordable housing folks. Their project in the Dunston area of town, so-called Marshview Terrace. This is the former Marshview restaurant, now the flea market is how you'd characterize it. We've done some initial work, just kind of understanding what the work ahead of us is. In this case, the council will have to consider creating a TIF district. It may include expanding an existing one that serves the property across Route 1, the Avesta project, or this is something that we're still kind of sorting through. I do also want to mention that because of the uniqueness of this project, they are going to be seeking two separate credit enhancement agreements. And that is really due to the fact that one of the projects is a senior affordable housing project that is intended to go through Maine Housing and be secured and financed through low-income tax credits. Whereas the back of the property is something we've been longing for years, an affordable housing, a workforce housing project. There was no kind of dedicated funding stream. And so these projects will be kind of, though they're on the same parcel, they'll be separate legal entities. And I think they'll need to make their individual case for the need for our support. I was pleased to be part of the All Board Summit last Thursday on the 13th. Councilors Anderson, Shoup, and Fellows were there. Thank you for your attendance and participation. I did my best to help facilitate it. I believe we had 30 attendees, which given the weather, I was pleased with. And those 30 attendees represented 17 different committees. So I think we had good representation. They seemed very interested and receptive to hearing about the council goals, provided some feedback that I think was appreciated. And I also took a brief moment to use the opportunity just to highlight the three major plans that are kind of on a landing pattern and will be before us this spring. I should also mention, I teased the idea of a appreciation event, and that's something I think I probably need to follow through on. So I will look for your involvement and open for ideas, but I thought it could be as simple as just a gathering down here at Memorial Park, maybe a simple little barbecue, again, just to appreciate the time and the talent that residents give us on a week in and week out basis. I think that's something we can pull off pretty easily. And I looked at my community services support team because I suspect they would be key in execution of that event. Lastly, I just want to mention a couple of traffic related matters. The council may recall last year we modified our traffic ordinance and removed all references to speed limits. Because at the end of the day, the state of Maine DOT sets all speed limits and they maintain that on their website. So it was really not appropriate for us to have it embedded in our local ordinance. In the process, we recognized 5 roads in town DOT has not set a speed limit on, and those being Maple Avenue, which was really hot and front and center during this conversation, Sawyer Road, Long Meadow Road, Beaver Brook Road, and Merrill Brook Road. Those last 3 are in North Scarborough. As you might recall, DOT needs to go out and do a speed study. They did that on Maple Avenue and actually lowered the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. They've come back to us for Sawyer Road. And for Sawyer, it will be set at 30 miles an hour. Currently, it's at 35. Beaver Brook will be 25, and currently it's 30. And Long Meadow will be at 20, shockingly, and currently it's at 25. So the final one that we're waiting on is Merrill Brook, and I'll certainly report that out. But with that direction from DOT, we'll install the proper signage indicating those new speed limits. And the last thing I'll mention is it's out of the urban compact, so there's the DOT responsibility entirely, but the intersection of Broad Turn Road and Burnham Road, I think has long been a very challenging intersection. It's in fact for decades been a high crash location and frankly getting worse. I don't know how long it's been, but there are stop signs currently on the Burnham Road approach, and Broad Turn is a kind of unimpeded access. DOT is going to be putting a 4-way stop there. And so that's going to be a major change to the traffic patterns. I'm not confident at all that DOT will do much advance notice. They do put some initial advanced signage that there's a new traffic pattern ahead. But for folks that travel Broad Turn Road, particularly in that stretch, I suspect are traveling 50 miles an hour pretty comfortably and then some. So I think it will take some adjustment. We have a couple of months, I think, before this happens. It's in their work plan for the spring and summer. So I'll work with communication staff to just get the awareness out there that something's going to be happening and just to pay attention. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Questions for Tom? John?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank Sedco and Karen Martin for the All Board Summit event as well. I thought that was great. And I love the idea of an appreciation event. I think Tom nominated me to flip burgers. And he also told me afterwards, we're going to do a dunk tank for the town manager. So
Touche.
Can we also have an ice cream truck?
yes, yes.
Yes, Counselor Cushing.
Why was the grant paused?
This is really, I believe, a function of some of the fast-moving environment in Washington right now. I don't know that it's a fatal blow to the program, but at this point, the official position is paused. And we're not clear as to when we'll get further clarification. The deadline is for the February 20th, so we haven't technically passed it yet.
So does this fall into that category of funds that have been approved by Congress, but they're not going to spend them? Is that-
Yes, I
Thank
believe,
you.
yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tom? Seeing none, I will go ahead and, per our amended agenda, take committee updates and liaison reports. And I'm just going to start down on John's end and go on down the line. So if Counselor Anderson, if you
Yep.
could get us started.
So since our last meeting, none of my committees have met, but we do have a finance committee meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and we're focusing on how to structure staff budget presentations. So if anybody has feedback or thoughts on that, feel free to email me and we'll discuss that with staff tomorrow. We also are looking at the TIF district for Higas Parkway and discussing potential changes to the TIF program there. And then looking at the Moody's and the debt reports. So again, same things I shared last time. Not much has happened since we last met.
Sustainability
Yeah.
reserve account as well.
Yep.
Thank you. Counselor Donovan?
Yeah, most of my committees have not met since we last had a town council meeting. But the school SBAC two has been active. It's been referenced by Tom. And therefore I won't cover much of what's going on there. Needless to say, it is working hard and it is going to work very hard for the next 2 months to be able to keep on schedule. I would like to be able to compliment Jim Pritchard, who's put a lot of effort into this and deserves to be recognized for that hard work. Don't always agree with him, but he's taking this work very seriously. As well, the leadership group headed by Chair Charlie Peters. And I was proud to say that while I've been listening and learning in the committee process, April has been active and contributing and constructive as the other town council representative. And so that should be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Fellows?
Thank you. Rules and Policy Committee, we've not met since the last time the council met, but we've got some things that are sort of starting to accumulate. So we've tentatively scheduled our next meeting for March 19th. I think that agenda may include making this agenda change permanent, if that's the will of the council and the chair. The planning board met last night. One noteworthy item that was the Downs amended the third phase of their town center subdivision. That includes the Market Basket store and another lot. And the board looked at a sketch plan review for that for Market Basket and the adjacent sites. So that obviously is just the start of that process. And long range planning does not meet again until March 14th.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and then I'll keep going down the line. For your calendars, per their charge, the school building committee has built into their charge some scheduled meetings with the joint town council and the BOE. And we were supposed to meet later in March, but they are requesting that we meet prior to that for some guidance. And so the school board chair, Shannon Lindstrom, and I have been in communication, and we have tentatively penciled March 6th at 6 o'clock prior to the start of their school board meeting for when we could potentially have that joint workshop. I will follow up with all of you once that is confirmed, but I just wanted you to have that date for your calendars now. Karen.
So the ordinance committee met last week and we were discussing the moratorium in the light industrial zone. So I'm looking forward to discussing the changes and the recommendations that will be coming forth the next council meeting. The ad hoc open space committee has pretty much wrapped up, and I know we have a workshop coming up. Which meeting is that?
That is scheduled for our March 5th
March
meeting.
5th. Yep, so then we'll have that workshop with that committee and get the presentation and then see the results of that. We had the Community Services Rec Advisory Board here this evening. They have not met and so they're going to be looking at their goals. I know we've been getting a lot of feedback in regards to the animal control ordinance, and I'll just say that. And so that might be something that they take up in regards to animal control and beach and things like that. The Conservation Commission has been doing a tree protection ordinance in response to some of the feedback that we've been getting from residents in regard to clear cutting. And then we have the Parks and Conservation Land Board who received their first application for the $6 million land bond. So that's exciting. So at their next meeting, they'll be reviewing a new application. That's what we got.
Thank you. Counselor Cushing.
Yes, the comms committee will meet tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I think our major focus, as I indicated before, is that we're going to try to figure out how to build some kind of local communication platform. And the real issue there is, what are the mechanics of that? How do we actually go about assembling a list of people to talk to, places to go, and so forth? And so hopefully we'll tackle that problem tomorrow night. Maybe we can build something sustainable. EcoMaine did meet, but then I went away on a cruise and I've forgotten everything that has happened since then. Although I will say that there was some deep concern about EcoMaine does a fantastic job of keeping pollutants out of our environment and meets or exceeds the standards. But of course, the goalpost is always moving. So there was some concern that the environmental standards were going to get even more stringent, and meeting them would be very, very costly if in fact they went through. But my general assessment at this point is it's the environment that's got to be concerned lately. So don't think we need to worry too much about that in the near future. I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Counselor Doherty?
Yeah, I don't have much of anything to report. I just like to take the time to thank Public Works for being man down and struggling. And I think with this storm, it was a good one. We haven't had one for quite a while, and for being down the way they were, I think they did pretty good. I had people calling me complaining before this about the road wasn't done. I think the one place was there was a subcontractor, and I think it was just they wasn't in communication, and the way they were plowing was different than the town usually did it. But I think she's gotten through, hopefully, because I've gone by the road and it looks great. You know, after that, it's taken care of. So good, kudos.
Certainly. Thank you. With that, I am going to go ahead and move on to our agenda for the evening. Order number 25-102 is a 7 p.m. public hearing on the proposed amendments to Chapter 311, Schedule of License, Permit, and Application Fees relating to beach passes. For the community's awareness, this is just a public hearing. There is no action being taken by the council this evening. And so with that, I will go ahead and open it up to public comment. If you would like to make public comment, please approach the podium or raise your hand online. You have 3 minutes to speak, and you can please address your comments to me as the chair.
Hi, Allison Bristol, Bayview Avenue. Thank you for the discussion. I'm going to talk quickly. This is kind of in response to the idea of zero fees, which I would not be supportive of, but just on the financials. $40 pass, 14 weeks to the summer. So if a vehicle came once a week, could spend the entire day parked at a beach for $2.86. A $5 pass to come for an entire day once a week is 36 cents a week. So, 36 cents each time. So it doesn't get any cheaper than that. The other thing I made a note of while I was listening to the conversation with the state park passes, their daily rates. I mean, Scarborough State Park is right here. Crescent Beach is right here. Scarborough is $8. Crescent is $6. And with the question with seniors, that is a lot of passes, and maybe it's not giving as many, passes as people want, or the state parks, you prove that you're 65, maybe 65 is the threshold. You prove at the gate you're 65 and they let you in for free. Maybe that's a way to go around it. Um, the other thing, looking at Nick's numbers, I looked at the $5 passes differently than anybody and noticed that 75% with the number of $5 passes that are issued, that's 75% of the $40 beach passes. So basically, people who get seasonal passes, 75% percent of them really pay $22.50 per pass. So do we do away with the $5 passes, or do we make the $5 passes 20 passes, so you get one parking pass for 40 and you get the second one for half or something like that? That might be a way to go. Totally agree with decreasing the number of non-resident passes. I might even cut it deeper than 400. The other thing about the where the money comes from, we had some really great success. Community Services had some great success with the Ranger program this past summer, and I understand from the conversations that I'm putting my Higgins Beach Association hat on now, had with Tom and Todd in the spring. The idea is to expand that. It was very effective. It supplemented enforcement on the beaches, where they kind of tag team with the police to call out problems and just help things run more smoothly. So if we don't make the revenue, and there's no revenue to expand the Ranger program, then I think that would be too bad, because we had a good experience. I know my light is blinking. I haven't, if you can just indulge me for another minute. The other thing that no one has talked about, if the beach fees are free, are what the impact is on the neighborhoods where the beaches are. And, I think it's a safe assumption that free beach passes means more volume. And I won't get into it here. I've emailed April and John a lot. I know I'm out of time, but I did want to point out, in 1980, there was a Higgins Beach Management Plan. And this was done with Town Council, Planning, Conservation, DEP, GPCOG, and Higgins Beach residents, together with technical consultants. And they determined that in 1980, the carrying capacity of Higgins Beach was running at a deficit, and projected that the deficit could triple by 2005. So now we're 20 years later. The study also took into account the area of seasonal berm, which we all know is fast disappearing, and it's vulnerable. So why would we drive more people down to a beach that's so fragile? We also have no beach at high tide. There's none unless you go to the eastern end of the beach. And we just made recreation more restrictive down there to protect the plovers. So before we start driving more people to beaches, we might want to give it some thought to the fragility of the beach areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I will go ahead and go online. Mr. Gates, I see your hand is raised.
Hi, thank you, Councilwoman Seither, Council Chairwoman Seither. Marvin Gates, 423 Black Point Road. I was heartened during the workshop to hear several counselors. I think I agree with Councilor Anderson about, it's better to save for future expenditures than to borrow. I think we all agree on that. I definitely agreed with Councilor Cushing that regarding the fee increase or even potential decrease, if I understood correctly, I think I agree that there is not enough data. And for example, the beach operating costs, as I read them, between 2021 and 2024 for Herd Park increased 350%. And the total beach operating costs between those years for everything increased 170%. I'd be interested in why. I'm not questioning the figures. However, the fee has been 40 during that entire time, and that doesn't seem to be keeping up with the operating costs. And I'd like to see sort of that fleshed out data-wise. And finally, although I do have a final point, I heard Councilor Donovan say, in my vernacular, there's no free lunch. I'm a senior. Every time I go get my license, they offer me a free beach pass, and what are you supposed to say? But the fact of the matter is, I don't think there should be any free beach passes. I like the idea of the veteran exclusion. I think we need to attract as many people to service as possible, and maybe that will demonstrate our appreciation that way. And my final point is, I sat on, it's been a couple of years, on the Coastal Water and Harbor Advisory Committee during the time that we increased the mooring fees and others by in the range of 300%. And I'm neither proud nor ashamed, but I was at the forefront of making the argument that the town has real assets, and one of them is its harbor, and one of them, the three of them are its beaches, and they should not be given away. And I think at $300, if that's still the mooring expense, went up from $100, I would argue it's a bargain. And I'll finish by saying my 90+ mooring holding Prouts Neck neighbors, I heard a little bit about that from them. I think I might include one of the counselors into that. Nobody likes it when things go up, but that's the cost of living. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Other members of the public wishing to make public comment? There's no one else in the room. Andrew, you should be granted permission to speak.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am calling in from Ashton Street in Higgins Beach right now, but I'm calling in opposition of the proposed parking fee amendments, specifically doing away with the early morning reduced rate and the afternoon reduced rate. I think that the non-resident users who rely on the current reduced rates are our neighbors in surrounding towns, and oftentimes far more considerate and respectful of beach rules than the influx of tourists that we see coming in every summer. We're talking about people who are walking their dog before work, who actually pick up their what after their dog, and they don't leave it to rot in the public trash cans outside the bathroom. They're the surfers who actually observe the 11 to 5 surf ban at Higgins, and they understand proper etiquette in the lineup and aren't a hazard to the people around them. They're people who want to go for a swim when they get off work early, and having to pay $20 to come down to the beach for an hour or two just does not seem fair. And these are the people who this proposed change, I think, would impact the most. And while recent increases in crowds on the beach and in the water is certainly frustrating to everyone, as I said, I'm living here right now and can tell as well as anybody the difference of what it looks like a January day on the beach versus an August day. But pricing regular people, our neighbors, out of their favorite beach or their home surf break is not the way to curb the beach's congestion. It would privilege only those with significant financial means and eliminate access to dozens, if not hundreds, of local people who call the beach home. So I think that the reduced rate in the morning and the evening is one of the great advantages that I've been able to enjoy in the past when I've been a Portland resident. I'm now here in Scarborough. And I think that that's something that should continue moving forward as, rights to beach access and public lands are now more than ever under threat. So I think we should lead by example and be a welcoming and accessible community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Could you please state your name and address for the public record?
Andrew D. Stabler, 18B Ashton Street.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else wishing to make public comment this evening? Seeing no more online and no more in the room, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Order number 25-013 is 7 p.m. public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendments to Chapter 302, Council Rules and Policies Manual, 202-3 Decorum. This is second reading. This was brought to us from the Rules and Policy Committee. Councilor Fellows, do you have a little bit of a tee up, or I could do it?
I don't think I have anything to add since last time. I think this, is partly in response to an incident that occurred last year, which you're well aware of. And I think we took great pains as a committee to try to be as reasonable as possible and arrive at language that was enforceable.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment on this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any counselor discussion on this? I just want to thank Rules and Policy. It is uncomfortable when you have to navigate a tricky situation as chair, but I think what came out of the discussion last time that I would just like to reiterate is really, it's not about limiting people's free speech. And for me, in that particular instance, it was about managing the people that were here in this room and making sure that this did not become a situation that, boiled over, got out of control. And so for that reason, I'm very grateful for the discussion and appreciative of the work. So thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Order 24-014 is 7 p.m. public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendments to Chapter 302A, Committees and Boards Manuals. Councilor Fellows?
So as a reminder, this relates to the Parks and Conservation Land Board, which for Councilor Shoup's update has already received an application for under the recently passed land bond. And I think that was part of the impetus for this, to create a couple of additional alternate positions and provide for more frequent meetings.
Excellent. Is there anyone in the public wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? I'll show that as unanimous. Thank you. Order 25-016 is a 7 p.m. public hearing and action on the new request for a food handler's license from New Dog Charleston, doing business as Goodways Market and Deli, located at 27 East Grand Avenue. This is coming to us from the clerk's office.
Yes, this, as it states, a new application. It used to be, I think, a Dog Deli?
Beach Market
Beach
Deli,
Market.
I think.
They've been vetted and everything is in order. Yeah, approved.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment on this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any council discussion?
Question.
Yes, Councilor
Let's do
Kirschner.
pizza.
I don't know that we've seen the menu. Any other council discussion? Seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you.
Former Councilor Chiazza would always ask for samples. Licenses came forward.
Order number 25-017 is 7 p.m. public hearing and action on the new request for a massage establishment license from Stephanie Washburn, doing business as Heal Massage and Therapy, located at 51 US Route 1, Suite 5, and for a new massage licensed therapist license for Sarah Thompson and Jack Strum, working at Heal Massage and Therapy, located at 51 US Route 1, Suite 5.
As required by the ordinance, this these are new applications. They do have to come before the council for approval. They've been vetted and we recommend.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any council discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to old business. Order number 24-101 is second reading on the request to amend the credit enhancement policy as recommended by the Finance Committee. I will turn it over to John to tee this up for us, please.
Yep, so again, this was something that the last council set as a council goal to revisit the policy and come back with a recommendation. It came back to the last council late in the game and we decided to let this council take it on and review it. So this is here for second reading. There is some amendments that are planned to be proposed tonight that I can go through when the time is right. But again, I think this has been, the work of a lot of work by Sedco with Karen and, looking forward to hopefully finalizing it tonight.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone in the public wishing to make public comment on this item?
Hi again, Allison Bristol, Bayview Avenue, and I'm not really prepared to beyond what I said at the last meeting too much because I've been focusing on beach fees. But I did want to respond to Councilor Dougherty's comment about workforce housing and single-family homes versus multi-units, which I think is a great idea. If the idea is for people to be able to build equity in their homes versus rentals. Also, I'm a little concerned about Tom's report that we're looking at 2 separate CEAs for senior housing and workforce housing. And that says to me that the workforce housing is going to be higher, significantly higher CNA than the Marshview Terrace might be looking for the senior housing. The other idea that I wanted to float out there is it occurred to me that if the CEAs for affordable housing are now going to float through the Housing Alliance, that they're going to be reviewed by Housing Alliance. Housing Alliance has an RFP proposal on its website. And I understand that that's for the impact fees that they distribute, like the 200,000 that the 3I project got. But I don't understand necessarily the need to create an affordable housing policy. If this could be if this, the points could be addressed as part of the RFP, if it's going to go through Housing Authority anyway, because my concern with the policy, just like everything else, is we're going to paint ourselves into a corner saying, okay, here are the bullet points and people meet that criteria. And, if we're doing too much, we're doing too little, there's no wiggle room. Once you have a policy, even though it just says it's a policy, I guarantee we'll be following it. So I hope you'll consider those ideas before coming to a conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, councilors. Nick McGee, 8 River Woods Drive. Just a couple notes. I noticed that there were some changes in this version, so thank you for some of those additions. I guess the one comment I have is it's on page 11. It's under the affordable housing projects, which is section B. There's like 3 areas where we start addressing what the mix will be, and that would be, so we talk about it in A, with the state's definition of at least 33% of the affordable housing units in the project must be less than the 120% of AMI. You get a little lower, we address locally that we have our own requirements and we want that to be 80% of AMI in one situation. And then if you go below that and you get into a mix of affordable and workforce housing, then we ask that 100% of the units meet our definition in chapter 405 zoning. And I guess my point of calling all of this out is I just want to make sure that you're consistent in your document on all 3 of those categories, what you're really asking for. If you end up with a mixed use of workforce and affordable, are they kind of circumventing that 80% requirement that you just said locally you wanted to see by just referring it back to 405? So I just didn't know if there was consistency in 405 and with what you're trying to do in those other sections. So that was my one big call out for now. But other than that, I appreciate you listening and making some additions, and look forward to hearing some discussion and some amendments. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make public comment? Seeing nobody online, nobody else in the room? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Council discussion.
Would you like me to propose the amendment to start or have general discussion first? If there's other specific conversations.
I think probably the best thing to do is propose your amendment. I'm not sure that there's a lot more discussion on the document as is.
I just saw Scott go forward. So Scott, you want to say something before I put the amendment on the floor?
Say quick, like she, referenced, I'm not really for apartment units in the town. Basically, we're financing it, right? This is the whole situation. We're gonna put money up to build it because this is what we want. But I think that the private sector should be able to build it if they want to build it. I'm not really, I don't really understand it mostly, but I just think that the private sector should do that. I would be for individual homes, small homes, an area somewhere to build small homes, maybe not tiny houses, but close to it, that'll be you gotta make it affordable. So you really have to get to a small one for young people starting out. Young people starting out, they can't do it. They're staying at home. I want them out. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Counselor Fellows.
I can just speak to that just very briefly and generally, and maybe that'll help tee up Councilor Anderson to talk about the amendments. I think it's really important to have a range of housing opportunities, housing options, and some housing diversity. So I fully agree, and I think most of us would agree that having, starter home, home ownership opportunities is really important, but it's not the right fit for everyone, and particularly at times like right now where interest rates are where they are. And so I think, looking at this policy that's in front of us, to me, the goal is to try to create a mechanism that will enable the town to help support a range of different housing types, including deeply affordable, as well as more kind of moderate income, so-called workforce housing. And that really informed a lot of my thinking as I was looking at potential revisions and amendments to this. And I would say that, I wouldn't characterize this as the town financing these projects. It's really just, it's one piece. It would be one piece that would help make certain projects feasible. You'd still have to have a mix of private financing sources and other outside funding sources, including developer equity in many cases. And, to my mind, this isn't about us as a town handing these things out like Halloween candy. I mean, there's a pretty high bar here in terms of the level of affordability and some of the other thresholds that we'll talk about. But I appreciate those comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor Cushing?
To Scott's point, is there anything in this policy, I'll direct this to Councilor Anderson, that would preclude a developer from having a piece of land and saying, look, what I want to do with this land is put single family, I'll use the word tiny little houses that are truly starter homes, and to have that fit within this policy.
There's nothing that precludes that. And I think some of the conversation that we're having right now is really around our goal for workforce housing, where I think we need to have more discussions around what we are looking for. And I assume as we have those conversations, we may want to revisit this policy and make adjustments. So again, I think we haven't really, as a council, dug into those types of things. That doesn't mean we can't do them in the future and then revisit the policy later if that's the will of the council and we want to be more specific.
But the major point of this, all of this began, I think, with the discussion around the 3I
Yeah.
project and the fact that we felt like we were stretching the limits of the existing policy.
Yeah, the
And
policy
so-
was originally built just for economic development
right.
CEAs and really excluded any
So,
mention of affordable housing.
so I think that what this does is create a framework
Mhm.
which allows us then to do what you're talking about, which is to have thoughtful discussions, not only about how much, but of what type, and to use this process to create an incentive. So this actually, I think, helps you, and to some extent me, get to what you're talking.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just add, and it is one of the things in here that is in here a couple of times, that while this is the policy, ultimately every decision for these is at the will of the council. And so if there's a council who feels very strongly with Scott's perspective and they choose not to approve a project because that is the will of the council at that moment, this would not restrict the council from making that choice if they so chose. So again, there's the danger of being so restrictive that we bind the council, and as some of the public said, it can become too restrictive. That doesn't give the council the, judgment that I think you want to preserve for these bodies to be able to make choices based on other factors that are important that perhaps aren't in the policy and give some flexibility.
Yeah, Counselor Fellows.
Just to quickly piggyback on that, and as some may recall with the 3I project, there was a proposal that was put in front of the council and what was ultimately approved was less than what had been requested, both in terms of percentage and the term of the agreement. So the council will continue to have that discretion to either say no outright or to maybe modulate it and try to arrive at some kind of a happy medium.
Yeah, Counselor Doherty.
That does clarify, that helps out, yeah, a lot, because I didn't know for sure if this is a hard, fastened thing we're approving, and this is, the logistics of it, I don't know, but I really want to lean towards, equity for younger people, rather than, if we want to help out, we could do that, and I think that's where we should put all of our efforts, or all of our money, or all of it. Thank you.
And just to speak to something that I provided in the chair update this week, John and I did have a conversation at leadership with Liam and Tom, just how to advance this conversation as it relates to our council goal. And really, to John's point, we have not, as a council, really discussed what our wants and our priorities are as it relates to developing affordable housing. And so we definitely have that on our minds. I think a workshop, where we at the very least kind of set some expectations and ground level points of where we're at will be really helpful and inform future discussions. And then to John's point, we can go back and revisit the policy if it needs tweaks that aren't in line with where this council is at. Counselor Anderson.
So with that, I would like to propose an amendment that we can walk through. I'm calling it the Thor Captain America amendment
I knew, yeah.
that Counselor Fellows and I worked on. So I can first walk through each item and then get a second to put it on the floor. All right, so if we want to, can we pull it up so I can, the actual document, if you don't mind?
While Liam goes ahead and pulls that up, I just want to caution Counselor Fellows about giving Counselor Anderson cool nicknames. And so moving forward, you've now been warned.
I think Counselor Slater
Or
was just
being
angry
because
because she
Or
didn't.
being
get
because of
nicknamed.
Counselor Anderson's tendency to steal people's thunder.
All right, so the first part was language that was added specifically to highlight the value that affordable housing brings in terms of economic development. So there's just language there that we tweaked and adjusted. And I'm just gonna highlight some of the major changes, not every single edit that's on here, because there was some cleanup and some word changes. So hopefully everybody had a chance to really review this.
Liam, can you magnify it just a bit? Thank you.
If you scroll down to the next page, again here, this is where, again, we're clarifying that, you know, while this policy sets direction and guidance for council decision-making, it's still ultimately the decision of the council whether they approve the project on a per project basis. So Scott, this is where this isn't going to bind you specifically if you don't like an element of the project because it's not aligned with what you think is important for the community. You can vote how you want to, regardless of how we work through the process and the recommendations that come out from Finance Committee or other stakeholders throughout the process. You can keep going. All right, if you stop here. Again, one of the things that when I was looking at other towns that have CA policies is they do have a list of certain things that help to guide decision-making. So this was just a list of things that the council could consider if they wanted to grant a CA policy. It's not an exhaustive list, it's just giving some guidance in terms of things that the council may want to consider in terms of what would be considered for a CEA. Right, if you keep going. Oh, sorry, go back up. So we elected to strike the notion of a threshold as a means for the value that CEAs need to create. In conversation with Councilor Fellows and I, you know, we felt like 2 million, 4 million, it's somewhat an arbitrary number. And putting a number in a policy that doesn't have something that we can back up didn't make sense. So it, you know, I felt at least that there were enough other things in the policy that helped to kind of give guidance. And so this one just didn't seem necessary and was something that the prior council or the council that created this put in there. And again, I don't feel strongly one way or the other. If someone thinks it's important to include back in, we can pull that out if that's important to anybody. Next is, again, the terms of the agreement. So here, Councilor Fellows actually recommended that we move it from a minimum of 10 years to 15 years as the minimum for the terms. I don't know, Councilor Fellows, if there's anything you want to add from the perspective there.
Sure, that's just thinking about, and again, it's not assumed that every single project applying for one of these would be a low-income housing tax credit project, but 15 years happens to be the compliance period. And as was stated during the 3I process, funders are ideally going to be looking for 20 or 30 years, something that's more coterminous with a loan term. But I think that 15 years would be the minimum to have meaningful impact for a tax credit project.
Great. All right, if you can keep scrolling, please, Liam. All right, if you could go back up a little bit, right? Sorry, to the financial analysis piece. So again, here, we just tried to make it quite simple where essentially every project requires that they have to do a financial analysis. This gave a little bit of wiggle room, but we just said just easier to have every project do it. And also offered that SEDCO would be available to support affordable housing projects because again, typically this isn't something that, you know, these types of projects in particular would have the resources or knowledge to do that type of analysis, but we have a model in place that SEDCO could partner with them on. So we added that. And if you keep going. All right, if you could stop there, please. I think this was a movement of some language to a different section, so you can keep going. All right, right. Sorry, if you scroll back up. So again, I get some of this was just clarifying some language. So this one is a clarification. Keep going. Okay. All right, so if you stop here. So to the public comments that were made, again, we were trying to make sure that we were linking the policy to 405 and the definitions that we have in 405. So the intent here was to be clear that if it's affordable housing project only, 100% of those units need to meet our definition in 405 of affordable housing. And if it's a mix of both affordable and workforce housing, that again, it needs to meet the definition in 405 of what we constitute as an affordable and workforce housing project as it relates to income. And so that was really the intent, was to make sure that we were just referring to our local ordinance and had that language in here so that it was clear to applicants that they need to make sure that they're compliant with our definitions. All right, if you keep going. You stop there, please. So there was feedback at the last council meeting that we wanted to potentially give some sort of local preference to Scarborough residents. So this isn't a hard requirement. It's one of those things where for every application, we say they need to meet at least 4 of the requirements when they submit their application. So if a project did come forward and did, you know, based on the law and regulations, offer some sort of preference to Scarborough, that would be something that the council could consider. We also included it as a scoring criteria factor for when the finance committee looks at it, so that they could weight it higher if they so choose to help with the recommendation. I think that might be the biggest ones. There was one, I think, sorry, go ahead.
We also, under number 4, under
Just scroll back up, Liam.
D, increased the target from 50 to, actually from,
Yes,
it was from 25 to 50 and then 75%.
right there, Liam. Yep. Yeah, so this was again, the feedback from counselors that they felt like 25% was maybe too low. And so, based on Corey's expertise, he had suggested 75%. So Corey, I don't know if you could talk a little bit why 75% seems reasonable. And again, this isn't a hard criteria that they must meet. This is if they are going above and beyond in terms of giving more units in that 40 to 60% range, that's a criteria that they could meet that could help get that project submitted.
Yeah, so just for my thinking on this was twofold. One, again, thinking about low-income housing tax credit projects, those are going to tend to be majority affordable, if not entirely affordable anyway. And then also, for me personally, I think thinking about, for me, it felt important to set a high bar. I think this, something like this more than, and again, it's not, as Councilor Anderson said, this is not in and of itself a threshold requirement, but it at least incentivizes deeper affordability. And I think that it combined with some of the other language will, I think it'll end up having kind of a self-selecting effect, or at least that would be my hope, that the projects that would come forward would have deep affordability and would not just have some affordability layered in just in order to just sort of get in the door.
Yeah. So with that, this is being proposed as a full amendment for consideration. So I think I need a second in order for council to deliberate. Captain America, can I get a second?
Second.
Council discussion. Yeah, Councilor Shu.
Sure. Thank you, John and Corey, for taking the time to do that. I just had a couple questions on page 6 under the CEA. You said you were eliminating the minimum threshold of development economic CEAs to, it was like 2 million of taxable value. I guess, so we're eliminating a threshold. Do other policies around us have thresholds? And then, I mean, are there financial implications if we eliminate that and are taking smaller projects?
So when I looked at all of the policies in the state, there are no other towns that have this type of threshold. And so again, I think if you support the notion that each project needs to be looked at as its own project, this allows those projects for consideration to come forward that could otherwise be prohibitive. And so again, when we were thinking of 2 versus 4, again, it's slightly arbitrary, and because I didn't see it anywhere else, it just seemed like it was something that the previous council that created this policy maybe felt strongly about, but personally, I didn't feel strongly one way or the other based on what I saw in other policies.
Right.
And just to add to that, the other motivator for me was that I didn't love the idea of having a raw dollar amount in a policy. You know, how much has the price of eggs changed in the last 12 months? So you're gonna have inflation, you're gonna have interest rate changes and things that are gonna change value. So I think there are enough other sort of threshold considerations here that will kind of serve as a gateway.
Okay. And then the only other question I had was under 4 for the terms of agreement. You said you want to change the terms of the agreement from 10 years to 15 years. Can you just give me a little background, like what's normal? Are there financial implications behind extending the agreement another 5 years?
And I don't, by the way, I don't, John used the word expertise. I don't claim to be. an
You are
authoritative
here, Corey.
expert.
You're a local expert.
I will say that at least based on what I've seen and including my own personal professional experience, that it's very common for these terms to be 20 or 30 years more. And as I mentioned earlier, 15 years, I think would be kind of the bare minimum because that tends to, at least for tax credit projects, long-term tax credit projects.
But you think 15 is okay, even though what you're saying
I think-
is what you see is typically something
Yes.
higher.
I think 15 is okay as a floor, and I think it's appropriate for, as I said earlier, for the council to have some discretion to be able to look at these projects on a case-by-case basis. Look at the analysis that's been done along with SEDCO to see what the net impact on the town will be and make that determination.
That was it. Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Yeah, Counselor Doherty.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I look at this as, when you go to vote, they have people getting signatures to get something on the ballot. And I always sign them, even if I'm not for what they want, because I think that it should go to vote and the people should have to say, and I'm gonna look at this as like that. I'll vote for it to get it on there to have discussion. That may be as far as it goes. Thank you.
Sure. John, do you, or Corey, do you, as it relates to the public comment, just in terms of there being a conflict with any of those 3 sections in terms of thresholds or numbers, did you feel like that was something that we needed to have just more discussion on? I have to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what Mr. McGee's concern is. And so if we could bring up that section and just take a
And maybe
minute to look at
Karen,
that.
if you have any thoughts on it. So this was on page.
Good evening, Karen Martin, Scarborough Economic Development Corporation. Yes, there are 2 sets of thresholds, basically. The ones that refer to the statute, you must do that. The others are in that category of, these are things that we'd like to see. You don't have to do them, but as Councilor Anderson said, I believe you put that in the back criteria that doing some of those things will rate better. So it's not a must, and that's why there's not that conflict. And the musts are a little bit lower than the things that we say are preferable, or these are good things that you should do. Is that helpful?
Very, thank you. Other council discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Returning to the main motion as amended, is there further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. New business order 25-018, act on the request from the fire chief to accept a donation from the leadership team of It'll Be Pizza for an ammonia gas meter and all the required calibration equipment estimated to be worth more than $5,000. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you so much. Really briefly, thank you for the opportunity to consider this. This is just really a great example of a partnership between a local business and the town. This started back in the spring of 2024 when they asked us to help them build a new emergency management plan for their facility. For those of you who don't know, the It'll Be Pizza, they have a large refrigeration operation in there that requires ammonia gas to be able to keep that up. And because of the amounts that they had, the state of Maine required them to do some additional emergency planning, and they asked us to help. And we worked really closely together with the whole auspice that this would never happen, nothing would ever happen. Well, in September of 2024, we had a minor release that was confined to the building itself, but it was a release nonetheless. And it was found during the after action review that public safety does anytime we have an incident, that we were lacking some resources to be able to do that. We ended up having to call Portland and South Portland, which are state hazmat teams that cost It'll Be Pizza a significant amount of money to pay for their services to come over and do that. Unsolicited, they came to us shortly after that and they said, we would like to provide you with the resource to be able to manage this on your own. Back in January of 29th, they finally were able to make that good and they brought the equipment over to the station. And would like to ask your consideration to accept that donation. It wasn't a cash donation, it was equipment. We're super happy to get that in service with the approval.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Second.
Any council discussion? I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. Order 25-109 is act on the request to accept the 2025 Town Council goals. If you'll remember at our previous meeting, I did have them pulled up on the screen. And I did that as part of a non-action item so that the public would have a window into the goals before we took action on them. This is just a single action item tonight to approve our goals. And so with that, is there anyone wishing to make public comment?
Allison Bristol, Bayview Avenue. Just a couple of things. First of all, thank you for all the work that everyone is doing. The thing I wanted to comment on is increased communications with residents to advance council goals. And I think that I'm going to use the beach fees as a great example of, why that has happened or not happened, and that the idea of making them free was floated at the last council meeting. That was the first time that came up, and I followed this through all of the Community Services Advisory Board meetings. So that's the first time we heard of it. And then tonight is a workshop that the public is not part of, but the public gets to make 3 minutes of public comment at the public hearing immediately following the workshop. And, you're supposed to respond to what is said at this workshop. So, and I know that there is so much work for the council to do, and it's not to, so this is not to say that this is the most important game in town. But my point is that, from communicating with Councilor Seither, Councilor Anderson, my suggestion was if free is really on the table, to table it and at least wait until the residents in the neighborhoods that this is going to affect are here. 2/3 of Higgins Beach is seasonal, and give them an opportunity to weigh in. And just because something gets placed in the leader and something gets posted on social media and something gets put in the newsletter, it's not to say people are aware. I was talking to people at the beach, as late as today, and people were not aware the beach fees were on the agenda tonight. So I mentioned this to Councilor Cushing, Councilor Anderson at the last communication. I think you have to figure out, and don't ask me how to do this, but I think you have to figure out a way to meet people where they are. And, to not to educate, because educate is saying, well, this is where it is. Engaging is really the word. So I would encourage you as part of your goals for the year to make that a real top priority. So people do feel, good about what's going on in town. Thank you so much for all your efforts and your hard work.
Thank you, Allison. Anyone else wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Very good.
Council discussion. Councilor Shu.
Sure. So we heard Randy Hogan, who is the chair of the Conservation Commission's public comments, and April was kind enough to share them with us. It's kind of hard to dive into all of the details of her email, but I think the point is, I think we kind of missed something, and I want to apologize. I was so excited to get my environmental goals there. I kind of missed that we were missing the environmental factors throughout all of the goals. And so I want to be mindful about that. I think the biggest issue that created is that we want to create a liaison to a private business in Scarborough. You know, to my mind, right now, our liaison to the businesses is Sedco. And so we're now creating a situation where we have residents who want to slow down growth, but yet we're taking a counselor's time and saying we're going to facilitate and create a liaison between growth and Scarborough. I think Randy's right. If you want to do that, I think we need to create a liaison in a situation that will capture what residents are actually asking for right now, and that is to slow down growth and pay attention to our environment. So I don't know if we want to eliminate the liaison position, if we want to think about it. Last year, I said to the Scarborough Land Trust, I was like, you need a liaison. And they're like, that's totally inappropriate. Is it? Because today we're saying we should have a liaison to the Downs. And it's the same concept. It's a liaison to a partner that we're working with in the community who is trying to better our community. But this is just for one department. And so I can't support the liaison unless we're going to have liaisons to support all of our goals in all the different fields. Specifically, when we look at the goals, I mean, you know, when we talk about housing use and land use, at a minimum, the Conservation Commission should be part of all of that. And I think that's when, you know, when we were putting the Housing Alliance, I really wanted to have someone environmentally friendly on that board, and that didn't happen. But I want to make sure that that is not lost in those conversations. I guess I'm looking for guidance from my counselors now. I don't want to come through and make amendments through all of these. If they think we should get rid of the liaison position, I think that's the easiest solution. If we're not going to, I think it's totally inappropriate for us to have a liaison to one business entity and not the others, or not other interest groups within the town, specifically considering resident feedback.
Thank you, Karen. Other council feedback? Councillor Cushing?
Yeah. So I don't even recall how we talked about the liaison, but I don't recall how it actually got into the goals document. But be that as it may, I think it's not correct to say it's a liaison to a business. It is a liaison to, frankly, a partnership in which we've got 80 million bucks into. It is something that comes before our planning board over and over again. It is a relationship which I believe, now that we've done it, we ought to get plugged in to what's going on out there and be able to report it. So somehow this notion that talking to people, you should even talk to your enemies. I read that someplace. Okay, it's a good idea to talk. And to take something that occupies this much in our town and not lean into it, I think is a mistake. And I know that irritates people because, you know, they sort of hate the Downs. I've said this before. I was a hater until I actually learned about it, okay, and recognized how much of a value this is to our community. So I think it would be a positive thing. Now, with respect to the Land Trust and the Conservation Board and so forth, I mean, when you look at our entire goals document, it's housing, it's conservation, it's communication. There's barely a word in here about economic development. And so our biggest economic development project, and we want to have a liaison to figure out what's going on out there and keep in touch and manage those relationships when, frankly, recently we've done some serious harm to those relationships, I think is worthwhile. Now, again, my comment is that we've worked extremely hard on this document. This process has been excellent. It's had plenty of input. People have participated. I think we have a good document here. If at a later date somebody else wants to propose that we should have a liaison to this one or that one, that'd be fine with me. But I don't feel like the Land Trust is underrepresented or or the Conservation Committee isn't active in keeping us in touch. You know, if anything, our slant here is almost anti-business, and that doesn't necessarily feel good. So my feeling is that we can't make everybody happy. We should try to engage with this project. We should have a liaison, and that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council discussion. Counselor Anderson.
Yeah, when I first joined council, this liaison role did exist and it was in place. And then when I became chair, I elected to not do it because I felt like similar, I think, feelings about the Downs at the time, and it felt like we were giving too much attention to one entity in town. In retrospect, I think that wasn't the best decision, and I think we needed to keep that relationship and partnership close to the council, because as Councilor Cushing said, there's so much intricacies that happen there. I do think it's good to have a counselor and staff engaged with them, reporting back to council on a regular basis on things that are happening. And I also think as part of our discussions that we've had at some point on this council, we've talked about the need to really jump into the conversations on growth. And because the Downs is synonymous with growth, we need them at the table when we have those conversations with the public. And so I don't have a problem with it. I also think as it relates to the goals, and we tried to communicate this at the All Board Summit, while we put some key committees that we thought were the most important ones, that doesn't mean that others don't play a role either in terms of consultation. And I think that's really the function of the council liaison and some of the staff supporting these committees, to really kind of ensure that we're bringing those connections to our committees, where maybe, again, we don't have them called out in our document, but if certain committees feel strongly that they need to be involved in the housing conversation, or they need to be involved and we didn't put them in there, then get involved. Like, please get involved. We need all the voices at the table. So it's not intended to say, because you aren't listed here, you're not involved and you're not included. No, we need every committee to support us in getting these goals complete. They're all residents at the end of the day. They all have things they care about and expertise. So we need all of that at the table as we're moving some of these things forward. So I don't technically see the need for an environmental liaison. I think we have a conservation committee, a parks and the land board there, a sustainability committee, an ad hoc open space committee. Like, we have so many groups right now focusing on it that I think, to Councilor Cushing's point, we do have a gap as it relates somewhat to economic development. And I think our key economic development partner deserves a little bit of a counselor and town staff time that hopefully keeps us all on the same page in terms of what's happening in that development.
Thanks, John. Counselor Fellows.
Yes, to my mind, I think part of the benefit of having a liaison to the Downs is that it hopefully kind of demystifies some of what's going on there. I think, I guess I think it's understandable that some might look at that if they look at the goals, particularly out of context, and they see that might stand out, and they may envision a smoke-filled room. But to me, it's precisely the opposite. I think there could be real benefits to having a more kind of standardized line of communication there. And as Councilor Anderson said, I think what's really critical there is that staff and whoever that liaison is reports back, and that there's a lot of transparency, and it's clear that that, again, it's not some super secret thing that's going on. But to Councilor Cushing's point, whether some of us like it or not, the town has a lot of skin in that game, and I think it's perfectly appropriate to have that be part of a broader communication strategy. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and comment just in that, I'm with you, Karen. We heard public comment. I did request that Randy send me a written copy of her public comment so that I could kind of digest it and see if there was ways that I could apply it to our goals so that we didn't have some glaring blind spot. And the more I looked at it today, the more I was really struggling to figure out how to incorporate that into our goals. And so I think what that speaks to for me personally is that even though the specificity of what she suggested is not spelled out, I think the intent is there. I think we already have some of these mechanisms in place. We do have so many committees, citizen committees that are engaged in the environmental aspect of our decision-making. And so I think at this point, I trust that if we are going to have conversations as it relates to development, that of course we're going to have an environmental component in those conversations. And so I'm struggling to kind of force it into what we had already written and agreed upon as a 7. And so I certainly want the public to feel heard and appreciated, and I value very much the input that we did receive. We also received some other public comment from a resident who is very engaged, and a lot of his goals related to the finance committee. And I trust that John read that email and said, I know how I can work some of these suggestions into the goals as it relates to the finance committee. And so I think we're there. And I'm not sure how to amend the document other than to say, you know, I hope that as the work progresses, we build the confidence with the committee members and our community that our intent is there, and that this document reflects the importance of the environment for all of us. Any other council discussion on the goals? Seeing none, I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor? Show that as unanimous. Thank you. Item 9 is non-action items. There are no non-action items this evening. Item 11 is councilor member comments. Are there any final comments that councilors would like to make? Councilor Anderson.
Jody, what do I need to do to change this to Thor Anderson? Just curious.
Councilor Fellows.
Just briefly, and since we were just talking about communication, and I in just the few months I've been on the council, and even before then, following council meetings, I've heard this refrain of, members of the public only get 3 minutes. Sometimes there's a corresponding perception that other, so-called special interests and developers may get more time and more access to the council or the town generally. I can only speak for myself, but I will say that, we get a lot of emails from members of the public, read them all, think about them all. We factor all that in. We also, we provide for public comment every time we have an item that's on the agenda, regardless of where it is in the process. I think it's a pretty liberal, welcoming policy. The outcomes may not always be what people want, but I think we try to do our best, and we really do listen. Thanks.
Thanks. Other council comment? Yeah, Councilor Doherty.
Yeah, I'm gonna skip all the way back to the beginning, back to the beach thing. There's one point that came up, and it's basically about the expense and the revenue we're collecting in. And they say that it's, somebody said it went up 300%, the expense of operating the beaches, and the fees haven't gone up. One thing is, employees, you gotta have the employees, but we did try this program, and they said it was very successful, but the park ranger, it's a lot of employees, and what is that costing? And do we really need it? I mean, I don't see too much unruliness. I know it does happen, and I guess I don't see it at Ferry Beach, but maybe I know over the Herd Parks. I've heard the Herd Park can be a real bad and crazy place. So maybe they need more help, to enforce issues. But, my thing is I want to cut the budget. And employees, you got to have the employees, and I praise the employees, and it's nothing against them personally, any of them, but I think that except for Public Works, we have plenty of employees, and we shouldn't probably have any more, but definitely Public Works, we need more, and we should have probably another plow truck. I mean, I don't know what the discussion is on it, whatever, but you're having all these developments, and and they have to maintain all these new roads, and you're going to need more, and we got to put the salary up to get the people, so that's top of the agenda to me, is as Public Works has to get what, you know, what they need to function. Because really, out of everything in town, the most important, everybody in town benefits from Public Works. I mean, the streets, everybody uses, even if you stay in your house all day long and never come out. Amazon comes to your house. So, you know, everybody uses the streets whether they use them or not. And so it's a critical part of the town. And I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Doherty. I have a feeling you are going to love your first budget season. Any other council comment?
Just one quick one that I've been trying to avoid the news, but it feels unavoidable these days. And I am reminded more frequently these days about the day that I stood up here and took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of this country. And I struggle a little bit because we've all sort of, you know, we try as much as possible to avoid national issues. And I don't intend to go off on a litany of things tonight, but I do think that, as Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. And we are leaders in this community, and we are seeing things in our community, in our country, which, regardless of how you feel about whether we should have a tax cut or, you know, this particular policy or that, the fundamental things that I think we all think of as the fabric of this country appear to be threatened. And a question that I think all of us need to consider is, at what point do we as community leaders need to think about taking stands on some issues that are of a greater magnitude than some of the things we deal with on a day-to-day basis? I don't know what the answer to that is, but I do know all of you. I know that you all think about these things regardless of which way you come down on the ballot box. Each one of us stands here every day, puts our hands on our heart and pledges allegiance, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, liberty, and justice for all. And I take that seriously. And I hope that we'll, as we go forward in the next few months, just be mindful of that and ask ourselves the question, at what point do we have a responsibility to the 3,000 people here that we represent to actually take a stand on some things? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.